It is always great to follow up the kids on Sunday morning because I know that I'm nowhere near like first, second, or third, or even fourth reason why you guys came today. I'm way, way, way down the list. What's also not fun is I don't have the same freedom that the kids have. It's really cute when they like lift up their shirts and like have all sorts of fun. If I do that on stage, it's just weird. But I do want to start off talking about freedom this morning because I think there's lots of different ways that we experience freedom in our lives. And we have freedom on Christmas, during the Christmas holiday season, getting to decide all sorts of great things. But when I think of freedom, there's only one thing that I truly think about, and that is vacation. I love getting to go on vacation. My family really enjoys getting to go to the beach. And I think there's actually two moments of freedom that happen during a vacation. There's the first moment that you can all probably imagine where you finally arrive at your destination, whether you flew, drove, I don't know if you're weird and bike to your destination, whatever it might be. You go out, you go on your trip, you arrive, get all your bags in, set them down, and you realize, I'm here, I'm free, I don't have obligations, unless you're one of those people that schedules out your entire vacation. Either way, you feel that moment of freedom, like you have finally arrived. And the second moment happens when you usually get home. You get in, same thing, throw down your bags, you arrive and you realize the freedom of getting to stay in the place that you designed. The bed that you made, the house that you decorated, all that stuff, you are home and you are free to be back in that space that you created. And so we experience those two different types of freedom when it comes to vacation. But we also experience that during the holiday season, especially as you mature from childhood to adulthood. You go from where you as the child have to follow all the rules and expectations that your parents set for you until you grow into an adult, and later on in life you get to be the one that decides everything, and you have the freedom to choose, or at least your spouse does, all of the things that you get to do every single holiday season. It might mean that your family members choose for you to have Christmas during a very important basketball game on a Saturday where you're playing your rival team, where Christmas and presents and kids are running around the entire time while you're screaming for Cardinals to lose because they're a terrible team. I have no experience with this whatsoever. Usually I just have absolute freedom every holiday season to pick and choose what I want every single thing to be like. And this is the great experience that we have. We get to choose, and it's not just during the holiday season, it's everything. We have the freedom in the country that we live in to choose most everything, but there's also dangers that come into play, which we're going to explore in the sermon today. We're in the middle of our Advent season that is going to finish and culminate on Christmas Eve. And so this is a 4-part series that we're going to finish on Christmas Eve. If you missed any of it, you can always go back. If you want to follow along today in our notes, you can scan the QR codes to your left, to your right. It's going to have lots of great notes for you to follow along with. Rob last week talked about the kind of collision of heaven and earth coming together when God spoke into the universe, let there be life. Or let there be light, and everything came into play from that point on. Heaven and earth collided, and there was finally some overlap. And the beautiful part of the Christmas story is that we get to celebrate that amazing thing, the God with us. It was like that in the garden, which Rob talked a lot about last week in the creation story, where when the universe was fully created, we finally got to experience what God with us was truly like, but then we messed it up over the course of history, which we'll talk about today, until the point when Jesus came and descended down upon us as a baby, and finally we got to experience what it truly meant to have God with us again, and we'll talk about that more over the weeks to come. But as we're diving into the message today, we're going to start off in Exodus chapter 13. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn there. I know it's not a common place to study when we're talking about Christmas, but I promise it's all pointing to the same place in the very end. But during the holiday season, I think the reason that this passage becomes so important to us is because we struggle maybe more than any other time of the year with the exact same thing that the Israelites constantly struggled with, which is idol worship. The main thing, the way that I always define idol worship, it is giving something your mind's full attention and your heart's full devotion. And we do that a lot during the Christmas season. It can be things that are honestly very good, but for some reason it gets our minds full attention, our hearts full devotion, or it's things that are bad that aren't really what Christmas is about that gets that exact same attention and devotion. And sometimes those things can cross into being bad on both accounts. Because even though there's something that was created to be good and is in every way what the holiday season about, sometimes we turn it into an idol because it becomes the tradition, and the tradition becomes more important than the reason behind what we do. The bad things are just bad to begin with. They're bad all the time. We don't want to focus on those things. And this happens all throughout the Christmas season. I think we get distracted just like the Israelites did over and over and over again, where they see things happening around them and they want to be like the people that they come in contact with instead of being the way that God wanted them to be. And in this story, and what we're going to kind of explore throughout today, this is the primary problem that the Israelites faced. They were coming out of Egypt into what was going to be the promised land, and God was going to create in them a great people, but they struggled with what that was supposed to look like because there were times where they missed being in Egypt. There were actually times where they missed being in slavery because their decisions were at least made for them in a way that they were comfortable with at the time. And so what happens in our story today leading up to it, we're going to find that this is right when the Israelites are coming out of Egypt. This is right when Pharaoh says, finally you can go. If you've seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, it's this great moment where millions of people are filing out of Egypt, headed towards the promised land. And the way that God guided these people was through a pillar of cloud and fire, is what Exodus calls it. And so in Exodus chapter 13, verses 21 through 22, we're going to see this cloud of fire, and we're going to see it do a few different things within this story and the ones shortly after it. The first thing we're going to find that the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire does is it lights up the darkness, as fire is supposed to do, right? One says this, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they may travel by day and by night. And the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. And so during the day, if you can imagine it with me, there's this giant cloud that's going to guide them through their destination. They're going to follow this pillar of cloud. And then at night, when honestly they were probably very, very afraid and there's no telling what was around them, the pillar of fire would give them light to see what was going on around them. If you've ever had children with you and you're in the dark, usually when you give light and you can finally see everything that's going on around you, that's when you start to finally feel okay. And so this was a comforting thing for the Israelites because they had a long way that they were going to go. If you could pull up the map for me that I've got on the slides, this is the destination or this is the route that they end up taking in order to get to the promised land. You'll notice there's like kind of a dash dot line at the very top that's kind of gray. If you were maybe on MapQuest, back in the day, this would have been the route that you would have taken. If you were doing Google Maps today or whatever, that's kind of the quickest route to where they were going. You can see the dash line, the dotted line that kind of goes a little bit south of that and then up. That's probably the safest route that they could have taken back in the day. However, God in the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire takes them along this like darker black route, as you can see, kind of zigzags all over the place. Because God knew the path that they were supposed to take and what they were supposed to see along that journey. And they were going to see lots of things around them that would probably terrify them. In fact, most of the horror movies that we watch present day, the scariest things are the things that are just out of sight. Honestly, it's kind of like your all's faces right now. I have this giant shining light in my eyes. I can't see any of you, but I can see like Jonathan's face kind of shadowy right here, and it just looks terrifying. The things that are just on the edge of the light are the things that are the most scary. It's just the way that our mind kind of plays tricks with us. And so that light that was coming from the pillar of fire was lighting up everything that they needed to see, and they knew not to venture much beyond that because there was going to be danger just past it. And so the second thing I think is very important that this pillar of cloud and pillar of fire does for the Israelites is it protects them. In fact, in Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 20, it says this, "Then the angel of the God who was going before the host of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel." So this is what we see biblically as accurate. If you've seen the Prince of Egypt, it's a little bit different in what they show. If you'll throw the picture up behind me as well. In the Bible, what we find is that as the Israelites are venturing toward the river, the pillar of cloud blocks the Egyptians so that they can't come up behind the Israelites and attack them. I really like the kind of drama behind the Prince of Egypt, though. You get to see this giant pillar of fire that creates this wall of fire that the horses and the chariots can't pass. Still, it kind of gives light to what we're supposed to understand that God is using this pillar of cloud and pillar of fire for. It is a sign of protection. He wants the Israelites to know that this is not just something that's going to light up their path. It is something that will defend them against everything that's on the outskirts. And so we've learned through this that there are two things so far that the pillar does. It lights up the darkness, it gives protection, but also, maybe most importantly, is it gives guidance. In Exodus chapter 24, verses 15 through 18, it says this: Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day, he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Now the departure of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So we see from this story that the pillar of cloud and fire leads them to a mountain. They follow it all the way up to Mount Sinai. And then on top of Mount Sinai, this is most famously where they received the Ten Commandments and the law. And so it wasn't just like MapQuest guiding them where they were supposed to go. It was also something that was going to teach them how to live. Because these people had been enslaved for 400 years. And so they kind of needed to learn what it was like to have somebody not oppressing them on a daily basis. They needed to figure out what it was going to be like to be dependent on the Lord. And if you were with us during our study of Exodus, you learned that this entire journey, and the whole reason they get kicked out of the promised land, is because God is trying to teach them absolute dependence on Him. And so He institutes a lot of great things that help them see the way they are supposed to live on a daily basis and survive on a daily basis. These are laws and practices that keep them holy, keep them safe, keep them healthy, and lots of things that we can still listen today. There's lots of great laws that still apply on what we should and should not do in our lives because it will help us be healthy and safe and secure. But it had to teach them absolute dependence. Because if you've ever had one of those moments where you're absolutely free, at the beginning it seems great, but then it becomes terrifying, especially when you don't know what's in front of you. The best example that I can think of this is if you've ever been out at sea, on a cruise, on a boat, wherever. If you've been out at sea at night, if you walk to the edge of your boat and look out, the only thing you can see is black. And it is absolutely terrifying that there is nothing that you can see beyond the waves just crashing at the bottom of your boat. It's scary what's going on in the distance. You have to have absolute trust that the people who are steering your ship, who have the navigation, who are going where they're supposed to go, they're avoiding the things they're supposed to avoid, you're at absolute freedom given to those people. You have to follow exactly what they say and what they're supposed to do. And I think this is what the Israelites had to feel like. Because as you saw by the map, they're in the middle of nowhere. They have no idea where they're supposed to go. There's not just landmarks everywhere that tell them exactly where they're supposed to be. God is supposed to be the one that's guiding them every step along the way. And so the pillar of cloud and fire was meant to do that for them from the time they left Egypt until they arrive in the promised land over the course of 40 plus years. And God tries to find a way to institute this into something that is going to be a lifestyle for them even once they reach the promised land. In fact, He wants them to build for Him a place where He can dwell amongst them, that kind of God with us moment that we talked about before. He wants to live and be a part of their everyday life. And so He wants to institute something called the tabernacle. The tabernacle is going to be this place where He could actually dwell with the people. Here's what it says in Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 through 18 that kind of describes life with the tabernacle and with God. On the day that the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of testimony, and at the evening it was over the tabernacle like the appearance of fire until morning. So it was always the cloud covered it by day and the appearance of fire by night. And whenever the cloud lifted from over the tent, after the people of Israel set out, and in the place where the cloud settled down, there the people of Israel camped. At the command of the Lord, the people of Israel set out, and at the command of the Lord, they camped. As long as the cloud rested over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. And so what we see in this story is every time the people of God came to rest, where God's cloud, that pillar of fire, came down into one place, they would build the tabernacle. They put it into place. It was lots of wood and sticks and curtains and stuff. They would set it up. I've got a picture for you if you want to try to imagine what this scene is like. And so they would set this up. The Spirit of God and the pillar of the cloud and fire would descend upon the tent, and there it would stay. And then when it was time for the people to move, maybe when danger was coming or whatever reason God would have foreseen, the Spirit of God would move up in the pillar of cloud and fire and go somewhere else. And anywhere that pillar then dropped, they would rebuild the tabernacle in this new spot. And it was there that they would dwell with God. And only if you remember what we taught some in the past, inside this tent, there's a place where the priest would have gathered. But then there was a spot where only God would be, and one person, which would have been the high priest, who would have had to have been completely holy in order to enter in to see the presence of God. And this would have been Aaron at the time of these stories. And so at this moment, God is able to still dwell with his people and amongst his people every time that they moved and went to a new place. And you would think that this was good. You would think that this would have been enough. You would think that through everything that God teaches them out in the wilderness, as he's helping them pick up and move safely from one place to the next, and dwells with them in each and every place, you would think that it was good enough. But we see tragedy enter in when the people finally get into the promised land, when they establish the tabernacle in one semi-permanent spot until it becomes much more permanent later. You see everybody sit down, and the most dangerous thing that can happen to humans happens. The people get comfortable. Even though the Israelites had no choice but to follow the light leading up to this point, finally, the people of God, when they get to be in their homes, kind of like that vacation moment that I was telling you about, when they enter into that moment of freedom, where they don't have to fight anymore, they've established where their land is, where their families are going to settle, where they're going to have kids and grandkids, they get comfortable. And they start to see the nations around them and what other people are doing around them, and they start to get jealous. They see how other nations are being led, and then they think, well, we want leadership done that way. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 through 5, it says, "Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, 'Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations.'" So even though God had led them all the way up to this point, even though he had guided them in every step along the way, even though he had protected them, even though he had fought on their behalf, the people still saw what everybody else had and wanted what they had. They wanted a king because for some reason they thought that the king they had in front of them, the God who had been in the pillar of cloud and fire, who had given them light in every dark place, was not good enough. The comfort made them want what other people had. Yet in the moments where they struggled was when they recognized their king. And even though we read this story thousands of years later, we fall into that same trap every single Christmas. We may not be asking for a king, but we do ask to do it ourselves. Whatever situation we're currently living in, we may not want somebody else to come in and lead us in place of God, but we do want that person to be ourselves. We see what we're going through in life, and we think that we can take control of the situation. We believe that whatever hardship we face, whatever trials we're going through, the best way for us to get through them is for us to figure it out, just grind it out, and we'll do it ourselves. We want to be the king of our own lives. I think the most critical part of this story, and the part that maybe hurts the most, and if you play this out for us today, is that God actually allows this to happen for them, and I think he allows it to happen for us. It says right after that, verses 7 and 9, "And so the Lord said to Samuel, 'Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them, according to all the deeds that they have done. From the day I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. God knows that when you put humans in charge of stuff, we're nowhere near as good as he is at it. If we follow God's guidance and we establish his protection and let him provide the light in the dark places of our lives, it always works out. It's always the moments where we take control that we struggle. The more we grasp at control, the more difficult of a time that we have. I think it's absolutely true that God allows this to happen so that the broken world can come to its full fruition in order that Jesus might come later. He knows that the only way that the people will ever fully be able to be with God the way he always wanted it to be was going to have to be through his Son, which was the plan from the beginning, and it would be the plan at the end. The only true light that would bring the light into the entire world for us all to live by. And so for us, I just summarized the whole Old Testament for you in like 15 minutes. Congratulations. We know this information. There's many of you who have read these stories, who maybe even heard the sermon series we did based out of the book of Exodus. And yet, every Christmas season, while we're celebrating the King, who's in control? Who's making the decisions? What are we really celebrating? I think the most important thing that we have to learn, if we don't want to fall into the same trap and fall into the same temptations that the Israelites did, we need reminders. We've got to set something up in place for us so that we don't have to struggle with this for the rest of eternity. I know there's probably many people in here that every time we get to the holiday season and the Christmas season, you probably get frustrated and stressed and anxious, or you might enjoy specific parts but not other parts. Maybe there's some of you who are just joyful and glee through the whole time. Those are probably the people that watch Elf every single day of the holiday season. For the rest of us who are just swept away by what's going on around us, who get to see the good sides of Christmas, but also the negative sides where we're constantly worshiping maybe the wrong things. Our staff knows good and well my vendetta against Christmas trees in churches, because I feel like it's probably not the thing we should be worshiping, and I realize I say that surrounded by like 20 Christmas trees. But we celebrate Christmas every single year, and a lot of times we worship the wrong things. And so my question first for you guys before we go any further is, number one, if we go back to that beginning definition that I mentioned with idol worship, what has your mind's full attention and your heart's full devotion? When you walked in this morning, what was on your mind? What was on your heart? What's the thing that for the last few weeks has been at the forefront of your mind's full attention and your heart's full devotion? If it's not being within the presence of God, then I think we're missing what Christmas is supposed to be about. From the very beginning, God instituted He created us, He instituted His way of life so that man could be with Him. That was the purpose, that was the outline, that's what we're supposed to celebrate at Christmas. And if we're anything short of that, then we're worshiping and celebrating the wrong things. I can give you a couple ideas on different reminders that you can set, some different things that you can put into place. You can set times to pray, you can set times to fast, you can set times for solitude and silence. You can schedule all those things out. And I would highly encourage you that if you have stressful weeks or weekends, or as you're going into Christmas, maybe take a time where you and your spouse, or if you're in a household by yourself, maybe where you take some time and you fast and pray and actually spend time with God. Spend time in His presence and not just trying to celebrate Him in this way or that way. The whole Christmas season is supposed to be about God with us, so maybe we should be with God. Could not encourage that more. Maybe it's times where you build together with your family. We like to read Christmas stories before Luke goes to bed. For some reason, he throws a Halloween book in every now and then. But for the most part, we try to read through Christmas stories and try to remind him of what the Christmas story is all about. Maybe it's service opportunities. We had an awesome time this past Friday where a bunch of us got to go down into southeast Kentucky and we got to just serve and love on some kids. And it was a great opportunity. It was a great reminder of what the Christmas season is supposed to be about. We tried to be the best representation for God with all of these different kids. One of my favorite holiday traditions that started with my parents, we have a little set of figures for the nativity scene, and we have Mary and Joseph on December 1st every year. We remove baby Jesus from the manger, and we take Mary and Joseph, and depending on if the donkey's lost or not, we take him or the camel, and we have him travel around our house all through the different rooms every single night. And it's a reminder every morning and every night of what was going on during the Christmas season, about this moment where Mary and Joseph arrived in the manger and the light of the world came into place. We see this main thing in the Christmas story that kind of harkens back to the creation story and to Exodus, where that pillar of light led everyone where they were supposed to go. The same thing happened in the birth of Jesus, where there was this miraculous sign in the sky that came. And it was like the brightest star in the night sky, and it showed people what was going on just over the manger in Jerusalem, or in Bethlehem, sorry. That light was finally coming into the world again, and we'll talk about that more in the weeks to come. That is what we are celebrating this holiday season, God with us. And so as I pray for you as we go out into the rest of this Christmas season, if God is with us, I want to know. I want you to reflect within yourself. How much time is God with you, and are you spending with God this holiday season? What reminders do you have set in place so that we don't fall in the same trap as the Israelites did? Let me pray for all of us this morning. Lord, we're so grateful to be just gathered in your house, to, with our kids, worship you and praise you for the amazing God that you are. Lord, I pray that this holiday season, that each and every one of us, whether we have a giant family, whether it's just one of us in the household, whether we're grandparents, new parents, whatever situation each and every one of us finds ourselves in, Lord, I pray that you would just give us those reminders. Give us the hunger and desire to be with you every minute, every day, Lord, to spend as much time as we possibly can in your presence, resting in you, Father. I pray for our church family that we can be marked as people who live this out on a regular basis, and that everywhere we go, that people would just see you and clearly see that we have been with you in your presence wherever we go, Lord. We love you so much. We lift these prayers up to you in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.